Welcome, my lovely brothers and sisters. Today I present to you the sixth part of the 13-part counting article written by Randi Green, an article that is all about social engineering and covert governance. Today, we start with the first part of the New World Order 2.0. It is an 31, no, 35 page counting pages. So today I do the first 15, and tomorrow the second, and then the day after the third, and then we have been through the third section of this article. Okay, let us begin. Let us go to screen share so that everybody can read along with me. All right. Section 3, the New World Order 2.0. A new type of re-urgence and the future of global governance. For decades, the phrase New World Order has been used to describe hidden power structures, global shifts, and the reorganization of societies. Yet beyond conspiracy and speculation, a tangible transformation is taking shape, one that is neither dystopian nor utopian, but a carefully engineered reality crafted by the hidden hands of history. This is not the world order imagined by democratic idealists nor nationalist strongholds. Instead, it is an advanced scientific, technological driven, hidden elite, a type of breaking away civilization. So, a breakaway civilization where power consolidates into high tech hidden hubs, parallel reality functional cities for now vibrating on another frequency, and covert global governance structures that resemble not nation-like states, but large global corporate innovation complexes and how they are run. Yet, as with all systems of power, unity proves fragile. The ancient hidden hand, deeply entangled in non-human intelligence relations, non-organic, otherworldly, and multidimensional contact, along with organic, otherworldly alliances, mostly technological, is itself beginning to fracture, mirroring humanity's own dilemma, whether to splinter into a subsidiary timeline or remain aligned with the main timeline of collective evolution. Looking forward to the main timeline of humanity's evolution, the everyday reality field most of us live within, appears to increasingly be reshaped by technological acceleration and potential transhumanistic ambitions. Among many challenges, we find environmental pressures, dwindling natural resources, and the emergence of disruptive so-called new normals as the divisive force driving societies toward solutions centered on potential genetic optimization, such as CRISPR technology, cognitive engineering, human technology interfaces, and secret neuron engineering. I skip all these footnotes because you can read it all by yourselves when downloading this article through the website links mentioned in the text box. and highly organized non-democratic social systems, as we have investigated in the other sections. So, cognitive engineering and the reshaping of human thought. This, my lovely brothers and sisters, is a process that is taking place for more than 100 years. So this could well explain why in the so-called Second World War so many people were very in alignment with um, greed-based political leaders, and thus also can explain why this head figure in Germany eventually had so many people believing him. So again, this cognitive engineering and the reshaping of human thought is already going on for at least 100 years. As humanity accelerates into an era defined by system level crisis and potential transhuman technological possibilities, one of the most consequential domains of transformation lies not in external machines, but in the internal architecture of the human mind. Cognitive engineering, once a fringe notion, has now become central to the trajectory of advanced societies, particularly those positioning themselves as the forefront of human technology convergence. So, cognitive engineering refers to the systematic shaping augmentation, which is already going on because the new generation humans are highly augmented already, or modulation of human thought, behavior, and perception using technical means. And I truly am advising you to find the videos of Sabrina Wallace on Rumble and on Odyssey, and then she can explain to you what augmentation is, because this is already going on through all the wearables, for example, that humans are wearing, such as smartwatches, Fitbits, and whatever. At its surface, this includes human technology interfaces such as brain-computer interfaces, which allows direct interaction between the brain and external systems. Wearable or implantable neurotechnologies that track and trace and alter attention, emotion, and memory. And this is already going on for at least 45 years. Entering, and this is already being used in therapeutic spaces for trauma, learning disorders, and whatever you have. Extended and augmented reality systems that not only overlay digital information but also restructure the attention economy, guiding where people need to be and have their attention on, such as orchestrated shootings, and so on. The narrative, the created narrative that they want us to believe, what they feel, and how they interpret complex environments. Our feelings, our thoughts, everything is already directed and controlled. Beneath the surface, however, is an emerging layer of classified or quasi-classified research, what might be called secret neuron engineering. This involves experimental manipulation at the level of neurons' synaptic networks and even consciousness fields, as well as your biofield, which is formerly known as your aura. Your biofield already is carrying a lot of biosensors, and if you are wearing a smartwatch or a Fitbit, these sensors are communicating with your Fitbit and with your smart watch. And through this, they can monitor your blood pressure, your sugar level, blood sugar levels, and whatsoever. So you are already under surveillance and control techniques and technologies. Due to the fact that we already breathe in nanotechnologies, we get these nanotechnologies through the air, through the soil, through our foods, and through our drinks. This involves experimental manipulation at the level of neurons, synaptic networks, and even consciousness fields, often developed within defense institutions or aligned with elite power structures. Well, for now we see them completely aligned with the elite power structures. And brothers and sisters, I'm telling you, the elite power structures are highly bored, so they have started to play this simulation game in which each and every human being, as well as animals, are now hooked up in a cloud and are completely controlled through all sorts of technologies, frequencies, wave spectra, vibrations, and whatever you have. Such as wearables and all the nanotechnology that we already have in our bloodstreams. Technologies here include nanobiotechnology, where nanomaterials are introduced into the brain for modulation or monitoring. And these are nanoscale materials. And oh, by the way, there's also in the textile industries, t-shirts with sensors in them. So yes, optogenetics, using light to control neurons with precision timing, originally developed for medical use, but now weaponized against us, but capable of behavioral influence. Yes, this is exactly what they are using. They are controlling us already for quite some time, and at least 30 years. Electromagnetic or frequency-based neuromodulation, which may serve as the invisible architecture for population-level cognitive steering. Yeah, look at all the so-called divisions that they are creating as all these groupings that are being played against one another. All of a sudden steering in protests that starts as friendly and loving protest and eventually are ending in some chaotic protest due to the fact that some people are being controlled through frequencies, parts of their brain are being manipulated or fried even, so that they become aggressive and start to act their aggressiveness out on others. The combined aim of these technologies, public and covert, is not merely treatment or announcement, but the capacity to reorganize cognitive architectures in line with new social paradigms. This means the emergence of a civilization in which trust, decision-making, and even perception itself are engineered through digital energetic overlays. When positioned within authoritarian governance models or technocratic enclaves, such systems pose serious ethical concerns. They could lead to cognitive hierarchies, dividing populations into enhanced and non-enhanced humans is already going on. Behavioral nudging or mental coercion is already going on, embedded in environments without consent. Loss of internal sovereignty, which is also already going on, where thought is no longer a private space but part of a distributed system optimized for so-called efficiency, not freedom. No. In parallel, conscious resistance networks and resilience hubs in Europe and parts of the US are beginning to develop alternative responses grounded not in control, but in coherence, self organization, and ethical awareness of human evolution. These hubs do not reject technology outright, instead, they seek to guide it from a different paradigm where intelligence is not something to be engineered from above, but fostered through distributed autonomy, inner integration, and relational responsibility. In this way, cognitive engineering becomes a forked path, either toward centralized command of human thought or toward the next evolution of sovereign consciousness in collaborative multi-intelligent civilizations. Genetic optimization and the CRISPR frontier. In parallel with cognitive engineering, genetic engineering is emerging as one of the primary factors shaping the human future. No tool has been more influential or controversial in this space than CRISPR, known as clustered regularly, interspaced, short, palindromic repeats. First discovered as a natural immune defense in bacteria. So something that in actuality is good has changed into a weaponized form to be misused tremendously. CRISPR has been adapted into a precision tool for editing the DNA of living organisms, better say to play with. It enables scientists to cut, insert, or delete genetic material with unprecedented accuracy using a DNA endonuclease enzyme called Cas9 as the molecular scalpel. In other words, Cas9 is a protein-based enzyme used to precisely cut DNA at targeted locations. It can potentially be used to eradicate inherited genetic diseases, enhance cognitive traits, though this remains speculative and ethically controversial, modifying physical features or performance, sometimes referred to as designer babies or animals in bioethical debates, as well as increase resilience to pandemics or environmental stressors of the future, such as Dolly the sheep. So CRISPR's implications are profound and twofold: therapeutic potential in its most benevolent form. Well, I think that already is not the case anymore. CRISPR holds the promise of curing genetic diseases, preventing hereditary disorders, and even fortifying immunity against viruses. So clinical trials already underway to treat conditions like sickle cell anemia, muscular dystrophy, and certain cancers. The emerging field of somatic gene therapy targets only the individual's body with no inherited changes, presented as ethical, controlled innovation. And two, heritable and announcement-based engineering. The more radical and ethically fraught applications come with germline editing, altering the DNA of embryos, eggs, and sperm so that modifications are passed on to future generations. Here, CRISPR becomes not just a medical tool, but a civilizational technology, well, better said, weapon, able to divine what types of bodies, capacities, and temperaments are considered as so called ideal. The result is the opening of an entirely new arena, genetic optimization in a world increasingly defined by resource scarcity, social complexity, and existential risk. CRISPR becomes not just a possibility but a temptation, particularly for highly organized strategic governance systems. And they are now using it as a weapon against life. State led eugenics programs. Indeed, CRISPR technology is now being used as such, disguised as public health initiatives or national announcement strategies. Private sector designer human services marketed to elites who can afford to optimize their offspring for intelligence, physical health, or emotional resilience. And then, as last, covert military use, including the engineering of specialized populations for cognitive, physical, or psychological advantages in warfare and control, especially the last one. Just as cognitive engineering might silently rewire thought, genetic engineering might silently redefine who counts as so called fit to survive and lead. So the power structures in this world are now having a huge weapon in their hands, in their greedy hands, to decide who can live and who needs to die. When viewed alongside technocratic, post-democratic governance models where power is no longer elected but selected, CRISPR becomes a tool not just for healing but for organizing society by biology. In its darkest path, it could give rise to a caste system of human types, some naturally optimized, others pathologized for their unmodified status. To resist this, a new ethical literacy must be seeded, not just among scientists, but among cultural architects, educators, and emerging resilience hubs. These hubs, forming in parts of Europe and within the underground or off grid networks in the US, are beginning to articulate alternative principles of evolution. That human worth is not reducible to genes, that complexity and diversity are evolutionary strengths, not problems to be solved, that true advancement lies in the integration of consciousness, not merely the alteration of biology. In this view, CRISPR without consciousness becomes a weapon of control, which has it become already. The question is no longer can we engineer the human, but who decides and from what paradigm? Non democratic future possibility. In this future, the ruling class may no longer be elected through mass democracy, but selected by specialized power institutions within strategically positioned clusters of governance. This is already going on, brothers and sisters. That is why the whole voting system is completely of no use anymore because of its corruption till the core of its construct. These clusters oversee and manage the materials, infrastructures, and informational systems essential to civilization itself. In more centralized or resource scarce contexts, similar structures may manifest as overt authoritarian governance, where power is centered around the few and not the many. Such governance models are historically seen to arise in response to environmental crisis, resource scarcity, and the mounting pressures of survival in rapidly shifting planetary conditions. This whole 2020 pandemic rollout, which began in early 2020 and had its most globally disruptive impact through 2022. According to Sabrina Wallace, this entire um, DocFit 19 has been completely um, driven by AI. Serves as a recent illustration of how systemic emergencies can catalyze the expansion of overt centralized control. Though the World Health Organization declared the formal end of DocFit 19 as a global health emergency in May 23, the pandemic period remains a critical reference point. It demonstrated how quickly mass populations can be reorganized under so-called emergency protocols and revealed the fragile, often porous boundary between public health imperatives and social political governance. This period exposed latent vulnerabilities in global supply chains, healthcare infrastructures, civil liberties, and democratic processes, while simultaneously providing a possible, no direct evidence, but we can speculate here, test bed for new governance architectures. Well, according to Sabrina Wallace, it was a test bed completely driven by AI in which they could see where they need to restructure the human population into becoming more obedient to their evil schemes. Um, so, a testbed for new governance architectures justified under the logic of so-called biosecurity, predictive modeling, and crisis response. Rapid technological deployment, such as digital health passports, real-time surveillance systems, and algorithmic contact tracing, became so-called normalized under the guise of collective safety, raising critical questions about the long-term implications of such tools for civic autonomy and personal agency. Importantly, the so-called pandemic also highlighted the social engineering dimension of instigated emergency response. Public discourse became highly polarized, with media driven narratives amplifying binary identity positions for or against vaccines, mandates, or institutional trust. Families and communities were fractured along these lines, indicating not just a biological crisis, but an epistemological one, a breakdown in shared truth systems, and a deepening of psychological fragmentation. In hindsight, DocFit 19 can be viewed not only as a public health crisis, but as a possible covert stress test for emergent technocratic governance models in which centralized authority and behavioral compliance could be enacted at scale, sometimes bypassing traditional democratic oversight. It also marked a turning point in the relationship between the individual and the state, with implications that extend far beyond the virological or epidemiological narrative. However, we must not overlook that during these years, the vast majority of individuals within governmental bodies, healthcare system, and public institutions acted, hopefully, with genuine care and a sincere intention to protect lives. Well, Well, I deliberately say hopefully. Many professionals, from frontline workers to policy makers, were operating under immense pressure and certainty, often without the benefit of complete or reliable information. Their efforts saved lives to a certain extent and upheld essential services in a time of global complete confusion. Yet, alongside these noble efforts, broader systemic forces shaped a dominant narrative that increasingly reflected centralized top down management models. The so called pandemic revealed how quickly binary thinking, such as pro or anti, or science versus misinformation, could be weaponized to divide populations, even turning families and communities against one another. Social and behavioral engineering tactics were embedded in this process, not necessarily by those enacting the policies on the ground, but by the overarching structures that guided and framed the narrative landscape. Well, this distinction is vital. What played out was not a coordinated conspiracy in the traditional sense, but rather an opportunistic consolidation of power structures that used the crisis to normalize emergency governance tools, expand surveillance, and erode civil liberties under the so called logic of biosecurity. The social reprogramming witnessed during this time points to a broader pattern of how modern crises, especially those with biological and existential dimensions, are being used to restructure societal norms, often without adequate public dialogue or democratic oversight. Um, Notably, another concerning aspect of the pandemic period was the marginalization and, in many cases, the active suppression of professional scientists, medical doctors, and public health experts who raised legitimate questions regarding the rapid rollout of mRNA based vaccines. These mRNA means nanotechnology based vaccines. These technologies, which involved novel delivery systems including lipid nanoparticles and gene editing tools previously untested at global scale, were introduced under emergency use authorizations with limited long-term safety data. Professionals who questioned this unprecedented deployment were often deplatformed, professionally sanctioned, or publicly discredited, regardless of their credentials prior standing. Rather than fostering open scientific discourse in a time of global uncertainty, chaos, and mayhem, the dominant response was to enforce a singular authorized narrative under the guise of protecting public trust and preventing misinformation. So, this crackdown created a chilling effect within the scientific and medical communities and further entrenched public polarization. This process towards specialized governance structures is not only reactive but increasingly preemptive, mirroring decision making models attributed to certain non human intelligences in contact literature, particularly those aligned with technological advancement, although ethically ambiguous trajectories. In such societal paradigms, decision making authority is not distributed equally but concentrated in entities deemed most so called fit for so-called capable of managing collective risk, an approach which often suppresses pluralism and self-determination in favor of efficiency and control. So, with this future transhuman vision, those who do not conform to predetermined societal models will most likely be relocated to alternative environments deemed more suitable for their deployment, for their development, and deployment. So this means, in actuality, that we are seeing a rehearsal of history again, but now in a so-called modern way because of all the technological aspect involved in this. Um, and then she says, or in darker interpretations, removed entirely, better said, killed, or put into maybe camps. This practice, though unsettling, echoes historical precedents. Exile, re-education, and segregation have long been tools for maintaining ideological and structural cohesion. So similarly, anecdotal accounts of non-human intelligent societies describe individuals whose consciousness or behavior does not align with the collective's evolutionary standards being transferred elsewhere to avoid disruption of systemic unity. These accounts, gathered from contact experiences, historical interpretations, and declassified testimonies, describe civilizations that operate under highly centralized technocratic systems. While efficient, these systems tend to suppress pluralism, individual agency, and moral complexity, raising critical questions about the trajectory humanity is currently on. Such possibilities raise profound ethical concerns. Who determines what qualifies as fitness? And what are the human costs of enforcing such engineered selection? So when discussing covert governance, it is of importance to recognize that the hidden architectures are described not merely as human power structures, but as systems entangled with multiple layers of non-human and otherworldly contact. 3.1, the non-human intelligent component of covert social engineering. And this will be a very interesting part of information for many of us. Within this landscape, observers and insiders often distinguish between several categories, each shaping human civilization in markedly different ways. Non-human intelligent relations typically refer to interactions, whether covertly managed, contested, or to some degree cooperative, with non-human intelligences whose motives and methods vary. Certain factions are perceived as pro-human, encouraging conscious evolution, technological transparency, and responsible planetary stewardship. Others are described as anti-human, seeking strategic control, and we can make the assumption, the careful assumption and careful conclusion that the human leaders can be led by anti-human factions that are seeking strategic control, cultural destabilization, or the exploitation of Earth's biological and energetic resources. And again, I think, brothers and sisters, that we are dealing with this, and that all these political leaders and CEOs of big companies and so on have all a participation in contacting of these non-human intelligences groups, factions that are anti-human and who wanna, yeah, plan and who are planning to invade or take over this planet and make it theirs. I don't know. That is just an assumption. That is something I think. These opposing alignments, if real, mirror the same ideological divides observed within human covert factions themselves. So, beyond these biological intelligences, reports often describe non organic, otherworldly, and multidimensional contact. Unlike classic extraterrestrial narratives, these involve encounters with conscious crafts that seem to possess agency, respond to human thought, or radiate complex informational fields. This could naturally also rely on advanced scanning and consciousness interactive technologies more than an act of independent agency. Other accounts speak of AI like intelligences, while these also exist, fast pattern based systems of awareness existing beyond our physical dimension and dimensional overseers experienced not as beings in the traditional sense. No, because according to Sabrina Wallace, um, it could be that we are having to see AI as the system of digital twins, but as structured fields of living energy or consciousness grids. Such entities or systems challenge ordinary definitions of life, mind, and technology, suggesting that contact may occur through resonance, energetic interface, and altered states rather than purely physical meetings. And brothers and sisters, I highly recommend you to again search for Sabrina Wallace, her videos on Rumble. Go to the channel of Nonfaxer 420 and Odyssey. Go to that channel and find Sabrina Wallace her videos and start watching these, because she explains in detail what digital twins are, and every city and village has also a digital twin. So we are already into something of which we have no clue ourselves what it is. Finally, there is the realm of organic otherworldly alliances, partnerships, anecdotal or partially attested through whistleblower testimony with biologically embodied extraterrestrial groups. Examples frequently mentioned in contact and abduction literature include the so-called tall Nordics, beings typically described as tall, fair-skinned, and resembling Northern Europeans. These entities are often portrayed as culturally analogous to human civilization, but representing a more advanced or future iteration of it. Okay. Among the diverse non-human intelligence archetypes reported in various contact and experiential accounts are the certain mantid or insectoid species frequently appear. These beings are typically described as tall, slender, and resembling terrestrial praying mantises, with elongated limbs, multifaceted eyes, and an overall exoskeletal appearance that markedly diverges from human morphology. Unlike more anthropomorphic or emotionally expressive entities, mantid or insectoid species are often portrayed as indifferent observers or scientists operating with objective clinical detachment rather than engaging directly in human affairs or ideological conflicts. In many accounts, their role appears to be that of indifferent scientists, researchers, or interdimensional field agents studying biological and technological phenomena without apparent agenda or emotional involvement. Um, the mantid's interests often center on genetic material, consciousness patterns, or ecological systems, suggesting a mandate oriented toward cataloging, experimentation, or maintaining observational records. So the true purpose of their involvement remains obscure but is of great concern, especially since their clinical detachment frequently coincides with participation in covert pro-human operations involving human subjects, subjected to controlled experiments that would otherwise be deemed unlawful. Their presence is often described as unsettling or even intimidating due to their alien physiology and unemotional demeanor. Though they are rarely characterized as openly hostile, instead their interactions appear governed by a strict code of non-interference toward what they consider lower-order species, coupled with calculated engagement designed to gather data without triggering large-scale disruptions. This understanding aligns with their conceptualization as scientists operating within an extensive, possibly multi-species research network monitoring the evolutionary trajectories of sentient beings, including humanity. Okay. Of course, we talk about renegade groups from the main Mantid collective in the fourth dimension, and I am willing to let that possibility be part of the picture as well. However, in these settings, the Mantid present there operate as precise controlled agents with a wider architecture of non-human involvement in human affairs. Their interactions reveal a type of intelligence that is both hyper-advanced and alien in its values, prioritizing data integrity, system feedback, and biological responsiveness over individual well-being, emotional integrity, or moral context. And then she describes, I am also aware of the existence of what may be called a council level mounted presence, i.e., entities operating at a more hierarchically elevated or meta organizational level, possibly interfacing with other non-human intelligent species or governing structures beyond our immediate dimensional framework. While this echelon is sometimes described in contactee literature as wise or ancient, their detachment is often misread as benevolence. At least, that is my opinion. In truth, their lack of emotional interference does not equate to altruism. It could just as well reflect a foundational disinterest in human ethical paradigms and an entirely different ontological priority system, simply because they see themselves as superior and as a more advanced overseeing race that are so-called assisting a so-called lesser developed race. Okay, then a little bit. Their continued engagement with humanity, whether through observational roles, scientific collaboration, or tactical co-deployment should therefore not straight up be interpreted as humanitarian assistance. No, no. Rather, it may reflect a long-standing symbiotic necessity or strategic entanglement tied to Earth's unique biospheric field and the evolutionary trajectory of the human species. Their involvement, while often not overtly hostile, should be approached with discernment, clarity, and the understanding that their motivations lie outside the range of typical human comprehension or moral coding. Okay, this then understanding the role of such species in contact literature enriches the broader discourse on non-human intelligences by highlighting modes of existence and interaction that do not conform to human emotional or social norms, but instead emphasize observation, analysis, and long-term study functions crucial for any advanced multi-species ecological or interdimensional systems. Not to be overlooked are the gray beings, who occupy a prominent place in many contact and abduction narratives. These entities are typically described as smaller with large black almond-shaped eyes, grayish skin, and so on, and slender bodies that lack overtly humanoid features. Okay, grays are frequently associated with genetic experimentation and hybridization programs involving humans and other species such as animals. Within these accounts, they are portrayed as methodical bioengineers focused on manipulating DNA, advancing engineering new hybrid species, and experimenting with biological traits in ways that often remain hidden from mainstream awareness. So the nature of their activities suggests an emphasis on long-term genetic projects, possibly aimed at producing hybrid offspring capable of adapting to multiple environments for and or bridging gaps between different species and or dimensional existences. Their work is often described as clinical and highly technical, driven by an advanced understanding of biology and biotechnology, maybe because they do this for several hundreds, if not hundreds and hundreds of years, yet frequently devoid of transparent ethical frameworks from a human perspective. Okay, I skip a part. Understanding the role of grace within these frameworks is crucial to comprehending the broader dynamics of non-human involvement in human affairs, particularly in the domains of genetic manipulation, technological transfer, and clandestine geopolitical maneuvering. Among the most compelling accounts of Earth-integrated non-human intelligences come not from modern contact narratives, but from ancient indigenous traditions. The Hopi people of the American Southwest preserve oral histories that describe a class of beings known as the Ant people, referred to as Anunnaki in the Hopi language, not to be confused with the Sumerian Mesopotamian version. These beings are said to have played a vital role during earlier world cycles, particularly in moments of global catastrophe, which we are in, as a matter of fact. We are in a huge catastrophe. In Hopi cosmology, humanity has passed through multiple world ages, each ending in destruction, due to moral decline and imbalance with nature. During the transition between these worlds, especially the second and third, the Ant people are said to have sheltered Hopi ancestors in subterranean chambers, enabling them to survive great cataclysms, whether flood, fire, or environmental collapses. These beings are remembered not as gods, but as wise and technologically advanced allies, whose deep dwellings beneath the earth offered both refuge and teachings. So descriptions of the ant people emphasizes their insectoid features, thin limbs, large heads, and prominent eyes, paralleling modern reports of insectoid non-human intelligences, including the so-called mantids, or mantids, I mean. Yet, unlike the emotionally indifferent or experimentally detached mantid class, the ant people are portrayed as benevolent and service-oriented, acting in accordance with planetary balance and the rhythms of cosmic time. So traditional Hopi teachings do not explicitly describe the ant people as extraterrestrial. Rather, they are seen as subterranean and integrated into the Earth system, a race or species that coexists with humanity across cyclical epochs, intervening only when necessary to preserve continuity and planetary equilibrium. Their story highlights a broader category of non-human intelligence, those who are bound to Earth itself not through control or domination, but through stewardship, ancient agreements, or ecological symbiosis. In this context, the ant people can be understood as a remnant or representative class of intelligences that maintain a hidden but ongoing presence within Earth's energetic and ecological architecture. So these are very interesting species. Their role in the human story, according to Hopi tradition, is not finished. So maybe they can re-emerge themselves again. In times of transition, when one world ends and another begins, it is said that these beings may again emerge or become perceptible to those capable of seeing beyond surface reality. As such, the Hopi ant people represents an important counterpoint to both benevolent and non-benevolent off-planet non-human intelligences, a grounded ancient intelligence that lives with the earth, not apart from it. And then as last, we have the Anunnaki, and the cross-cultural echo. I skipped some parts, otherwise I cannot manage it between now and 5 minutes. A particular intriguing dimension of insectoid NHI presence arises within the oral traditions of the Hopi people who speak of the ant people. Okay, so Anu-Naki translates quite literally as ant friends or ant people. I skipped this part. You can read it all by yourself by downloading this article freely from the mentioned websites in the text box. What makes this even more striking is the phonetic echo of this name, Anunnaki, with the Mesopotamian Anunnaki. So there's a double N. Maybe they have stolen the name, I don't know. A term that in Sumerian and Akkadian cosmology refers to deities or beings who came from heaven to earth, while the linguistic roots are entirely separate and there is no direct historical connection between Hopi and Mesopotamian cultures. The convergence of terminology describing non-human beings with advanced capabilities has led to legitimate cross-cultural inquiry and reflection. Okay, the Sumerian type are typically depicted as sky beings or advanced human-like beings involved in the shaping of human civilization, particularly through genetic, agricultural, and societal interventions. So the Hopi Anunnaki, by contrast, are insectoid and associated with intraplanetary guidance, offering survival knowledge and subterranean refuge, yet both share a uh, thematic through line: non-human intelligences providing critical assistance or manipulation during pivotal thresholds in human development. And then as last, this correspondence may be more than linguistic coincidence. It could represent a deep systemic archetype or even evidence of a shared NHI class operating across planetary systems, appearing differently depending on cultural filters and planetary context. Within the broader framework, such beings might occupy a mid-tier role in interspecies research, ecological stewardship, or species survival protocols, simultaneously acting within planetary systems as underground stewards and through interplanetary coordination as evolutionary agents. So such beings, if present, would not need overt recognition. Their influence may operate on the level of encoded ontological narratives, remembered rescue, or unacknowledged interaction, leaving just enough trace to seed memory, but not disrupt the collective developmental arc. The case of the Anu-Naki, the ant people across cultures, asks us to reframe our understanding of myth not as fiction but as a complex storage system for multidimensional data rendered through human storytelling. And tomorrow, okay, a shared symbolic or energetic language. I skipped this last part because we are already at 1 hour and 4 minutes. I'm asking you to read this last part till page 95, which means till the title Asymbiotic Threat Beneath Apparent Assistance. Read this last part for yourself, because otherwise I cannot upload it to BitChute. All right, thank you so much for listening and reading along with me. This is a very interesting piece of information, and I highly recommend you to re-listen and reread this information. Download it yourself, the entire article, from the mentioned website links. Okay, I wish you all a beautiful, joyful day filled with a lot of love and joy, truth and wisdom, and God bless you. And let us listen to a beautiful piece of music coming from Ben Sound, known as Cozy Coffee Hour. And see you next time. Tomorrow, new book reading, new